Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into a really foundational story, the selection of Abraham. And the big question isn't just what happened, but why? Why him? Why Abraham, at that moment, to be the father of faith and to receive this everlasting covenant?
It's a huge question, definitely one scholars have wrestled with for, well, centuries. And while, the ultimate why is always going to involve divine choice, God's sovereignty.
Sure, by definition.
Exactly. But the sources, the texts themselves, they actually give us some pretty clear reasons. They're right there in the narrative, showing why Abraham was, let's say, suited for this massive role.
Okay, so our mission today is to pull out those key reasons. And it seems like the narrative kind of groups them into maybe four main ideas. There's his own reaction, his job description almost, as a teacher. Right, as a teacher and patriarch, the sheer scale of the whole thing, the universal purpose.
Yeah, the global aspect.
And finally, what it tells us about grace, God's grace. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with maybe the most obvious one, his faith, and that, well, really radical obedience right at the start.
That first step is just critical. You have to picture it. Abraham's living in Ur. This isn't some backwater. It's a sophisticated city polytheistic culture.
Right, lots of gods, established ways.
Totally. And then, bam, Genesis 12, he gets this call. Leave your country, your relatives, your father's whole setup, and go. Just go. To somewhere I'll show you. Eventually.
Not just to move across town, then. Oh. It's a complete life demolition. For someone probably established, leaving all that security, family, everything, for a destination unknown, that's a staggering level of trust.
Yeah.
How much pressure must that have been, not even having the full picture?
Oh, immense. It's an existential leap. And the fact that he did it immediately, practically, without knowing the where, but that's the radical face the text highlights. It wasn't just an internal feeling. It was putting everything on the line, submitting his entire future to God's direction. It showed something unique about his heart.
And the sources really nail this down, don't they? Genesis 15:6, it explicitly says Abraham believed the Lord and he credited it to him as righteousness. So that trust, that belief itself, it wasn't just a nice quality. It was the actual basis of his standing, of the whole relationship.
Precisely. That's the foundation. But, the narrative doesn't stop there. It pushes that faith to the absolute extreme. We really have to talk about the ultimate test, Isaac, his willingness to sacrifice his own son.
Right.
And what's so powerful there isn't just blind obedience to a shocking command. It's about faith in the promise.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. Because Isaac was the promise, right? The whole future nation, the covenant, it all rested on him. So God is telling him to essentially destroy the very means by which the promise would be fulfilled. That's the ultimate contradiction.
Exactly. So his obedience in that moment, it showed he believed God could still fulfill the promise, even if it meant resurrection or some miracle totally beyond Abraham's understanding. It was complete trust in God's power and faithfulness, even when it seemed illogical. He proved he was all in, no matter the cost, ready for whatever the covenant demanded down the line.
Okay, so his personal faith, his obedience, that proves he's the right person for this relationship. But then what was he chosen to actually do? This shifts things a bit from him personally to his function, his role. What did God need him to be?
And here, the text actually gives us God's own stated reason, which is fascinating. Genesis 18, verse 19. God says, basically, I've chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord, and how? By doing righteousness and justice.
Righteousness and justice. That's specific. So it wasn't just about finding a good guy. It was about finding someone who could effectively teach, who could build a whole culture around these principles in that ancient world, which could be pretty rough.
Yeah.
How realistic was that, expecting one man to pass that down through generations?
It means he couldn't just be righteous himself. He had to make it stick. He needed to be a leader, a teacher, a moral compass for his entire growing household. The covenant wasn't just for him. It had to be passed on. It needed a reliable transmitter. Abraham was chosen because God saw he could do that, teach and uphold justice. The whole timeline kind of depended on him being that strong, guiding patriarch.
Which leads us naturally to the third reason you mentioned. The global scale of it all. If he's the patriarch of this special people, what was the point beyond just them? What was the bigger mission?
Well, the amazing thing is that universal scope was there right from the very start. Genesis 12 again. God says, I'll make you a great nation, I'll bless you. And here's the crucial part, in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed.
Right there at the beginning.
Right there. So the plan immediately had these, global redemptive ripples. It was never just about one family line in isolation.
That's huge.
Yeah.
It means the whole covenant, the special status, it was always a means to an end, a much bigger end. This lineage wasn't meant to be exclusive, but rather the starting point for blessing everyone. The sources really seem to stress that this line was the channel for, well, ultimate global blessing.
Yeah, and if you connect the dots through the rest of the narrative tradition, that promise, all families of the earth shall be blessed, it's understood as pointing towards something massive, towards the eventual arrival of the Messiah, extending God's salvation, God's blessing, way beyond Abraham's direct descendants, to reach everyone. The whole point was setting up a conduit so that God's light, God's promise, would eventually touch all nations through this specific family.
Okay, so we have this incredible picture building. Radical faith, a teaching role, a world-changing purpose. But that brings us to the fourth point you raised, which is maybe the most humbling. About grace. If Abraham was so capable, so faithful, was he just picked because he was the best candidate on paper? What was his background before God called him?
This is really key, I think, to understanding the grace involved. The sources are pretty blunt about his origins. He wasn't some great moral leader or powerful figure when the call came. In fact, later on, the book of Joshua explicitly says his family, his father Terah included, worshipped other gods back beyond the Euphrates.
Wow. So part of a polytheistic family hadn't yet shown that incredible faith. It means the choice couldn't have been based on like pre-existing merit points. So what's the takeaway then?
It means the choice itself was fundamentally an act of God's sovereign grace and election. It underlines that the covenant started with God's initiative, his promise, not because Abraham had already earned it or qualified himself at that specific moment. He didn't win the selection. It was given, a gift.
So the selection itself is grace.
Exactly. And then what Abraham would show later, the faith, the obedience, the teaching, those were the qualities that proved him suitable for the job, the right vessel to carry out the mission God gave him. But the initial choice, that really highlights how God often picks the unlikely, the ordinary, to do extraordinary things. It's a mystery rooted in grace.
This has been incredibly helpful, really clarifying. We've sort of unpacked these four pillars explaining Abraham's choice. His radical faith and obedience is the foundation, his crucial role as a teacher and patriarch, ensuring the values were passed on, the huge universal purpose to bless all nations, and finally, seeing it all as this profound demonstration of sovereign grace, reminding us it started as a gift.
Yeah, it really shows the depth, doesn't it? He was chosen to start something unique, a people dedicated to righteousness and justice, yes, but also intended from day one to be the channel through which God's blessing would reach the entire world, kicking off that grand, redemptive story.
And that specific mandate that he was chosen so that he would direct his household towards justice and righteousness, that's such a powerful statement about leadership and passing on core principles. It really makes you think. Considering that emphasis on effectively transmitting foundational values, what kind of leadership or maybe family instruction models today do you think best reflect that mission, that challenge of passing on deep guiding principles of justice and morality? Something for you, the listener, to mull over after this deep dive.